Hello and welcome to episode 14 of 5-Minute Theology. Today we're talking about the righteousness of God. What on earth is righteousness? Righteousness is a word that we really only hear when we're talking about our faith. It's not typically something that you would see or find in the world. When we do hear it, it's often like a derogatory term like, oh, she's so righteous. We don't hear people lifting up that concept. I would contend that most people today don't really understand what righteousness is. We speak about it, but we don't often explain it. The Bible talks a ton about this concept, both in the Old and the New Testament. Check out Psalm 89:14. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. Steadfast love and faithfulness go before you. So righteousness is central to who God is. Some would call it a moral attribute of God. It's also closely linked to the concept of justice. In fact, the Greek word dikaios in the New Testament can mean both righteous and just. But today those two concepts are not ones that we would link together. Today you hear people clamoring for justice, but you don't often hear people campaigning for righteousness. I mean, maybe some do, but I don't hear them as much. Why is that? Well, look at Romans chapter 3, verse 10. None is righteous, no, not one. So there you go. Righteousness is not something we have attained. It's not something anyone has ever attained on this earth. Whatever it is, we don't have it. On the other hand, read 2 Timothy 4:8. Henceforth there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, this is Paul, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. So here it is. Despite their unrighteousness, sinners are rewarded with righteousness by faith or by loving the Lord. But there's a caveat. We have to stand before a righteous judge, as Paul says. So we can think of it like this. The one who is righteous has the authority to judge those who are unrighteous, but this judge has the grace to bestow upon the unrighteous his own righteousness. So that's the gospel in a nutshell. But we still haven't answered the question, what is righteousness? So righteousness is, if I could define it in a very succinct way, it would be this. God's actions never violate the law that He has established. Or God acts according to the highest principle of justice, which is Himself. God always does what is right. In other words, here's another way of saying it. God always commands what is right. God always does what is right. God is always consistent with Himself. Some would say that righteousness is how God acts in accordance with His own holiness. Some might explain it like that. In this instance, I think the Hebrew can actually help us. The Hebrew word sadak means to be straight. So His righteousness means that or righteousness itself means that someone can be in a right relationship with the law. Closely associated with the Hebrew word sadak is the word sapat, which means to judge, and the word mispat, which means justice. So to be righteous is to exercise justice, to be justified. It's to do what is right and to love what is right. Which leads us to our problem. Have you always done what is right? No, you have not. You are, I am, in the eyes of God, unrighteous. That is all of us. Americans have no real concept of righteousness because nobody is righteous. Everyone is sinful. But we all have guilt and shame because we know in our conscience that we haven't done what is right and we haven't fulfilled that standard. We haven't lived in accordance with the law. We haven't done what is righteous or what is right. So how in the world are we to be made right with God? Well, Genesis 15:6. And he believed, this is Abraham, he believed the Lord and He counted it to him as righteousness. So God takes our faith and turns it into righteousness. How? How does He do that? Well, it depends on what our faith is in. Philippians chapter 3, verse 9. Be found in Him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which comes through faith in Jesus Christ, or Christ. The righteousness from God that depends on faith. Do you see that? From God. In short, our salvation hinges on Jesus' righteousness, not our own. Jesus kept the law. Jesus did what is right. Jesus was always consistent with the commands of God because He is God. Therefore, Jesus has the power to judge us and save us. He is just, so for those who repent of their sins and ask the Lord for His salvation, He gives us His righteousness. There will not be one person who ever walks into heaven with their own righteousness. That will never happen. Thankfully, because of Jesus, God can now look upon us as if we had not violated the law, as if we had done completely what is right, as if we are inherently righteous. And now by the Spirit of Christ, we can live or start to practice righteousness ourselves. So that's what's right. That's the definition of righteousness, and we can't talk about the concept without talking inevitably about the righteousness of God, which allows us to be saved.